Okay. Hello. Welcome back, everybody. It's O-Tōkushō. We're back again. It's episode 4, guys.
Yeah, and this time we're doing it in the same room.
Yeah.
It's like we're an actual podcast now. How about that?
Incredible. In the same location.
Unfortunately, we don't really have too much news going on this week. There probably is, but I just couldn't find anything that was interesting to talk about.
Yeah, of course there's going to be like minor news here and there for like random novelizations that are happening that we just happen to not really care about.
Yeah, or like a new trailer for something or other, but nothing
big.
Yeah.
No major thing coming out. Not even major as a Pokemon movie, which in retrospect isn't really that major, but you know.
Could be major to someone.
Yeah, for people who still care.
Not us.
No.
So I guess we can just jump right into the manga reviews this week. Do you want to go first, or I can go first?
I can go first.
Right.
So I had 7 Deadly Sins. I chose to do something a little different this time. Again, shocker. So instead of reading a volume, I actually chose to read a side story. So there were a couple of extra, quote-unquote, chapters released during 7 Deadly Sins' run. And these extra chapters are kind of sprinkled here and there to elaborate on plot points that had just been brought up. And the extra chapters that I'm going to be talking about are specifically the Vampires of Edinburgh. So the Vampires of Edinburgh side story was released in 3 parts, and it was supposed to basically hype up the best character in the entire series, in my opinion, Mr. Sunshine himself. For anyone who isn't familiar, this absolute unit of a man... There's a bit of a meme associated with Escanor. He's like the sun, so strong and so proud that it's not really fair. Before any of that happens in the series, he's kind of just like an ominous figure. We always know, before he even shows up, that he's the strongest member of the 7 Deadly Sins. And we don't know how that's even possible, because Bon and Meliodas are like tabletopping and suplexing each other through mountains before this happens. And they're doing some wild stuff. And we find out that Escanor's like really, really strong, even by comparison to these guys. So, before we even get to meet this guy and see what he can do, we get this backstory, which is this flashback in the form of a side story. So, the Vampires of Edinburgh is obviously about vampires. We learn that these vampires were very strong, and suddenly, all vampires disappeared. And when I say all of them, I mean literally all vampires in Britannia are gone. They all disappeared one day, and we don't know why. And we're finding out how they disappeared. So, to go into the actual volume, quote-unquote, here, it's mostly just 3 chapters, we learn about the Vampires of Edinburgh. Apparently, vampires were already kind of a thing, but they weren't a big problem. Until suddenly, an entire, country / small nation was overtaken by them overnight. Suddenly, all the people there just died, and they were all replaced by vampires. We didn't know that was possible because, the whole day-night cycle thing. But apparently the Vampire King is so strong that they can make nighttime appear during the day with their magic. Which is how they, manage to survive and take over a kingdom. Mm. So we find out about these vampires and how they're really strong. And of course it brings us over to, the 7 Deadly Sins. And because this is a flashback, they're actually considered the 7 Deadly Sins, and they're also viewed as heroes still. Which is great, for the audience seeing them actually be a team and fighting as a squad. Because we're used to them kind of just being random, vagabonds, kind of just living out in the middle of nowhere, trying to not be arrested and potentially executed. Besides Bon, who doesn't care, and actively got executed every day for a decade because it was fun. They send the 7 Deadly Sins in to, deal with the vampires because they're, Britannia's greatest knights and heroes, whatever, and it's a logical first line of defense to fight against something like this. So they send them all in, and you see everybody do some cool stuff, Bon does his thing, he, decapitates 100 vampires all at once, and, steals their hearts or whatever.
Wait, really?
Yeah, actually.
Because that's interesting, because in the actual anime, Gother points out that Bon sat out the battle, and that he was using physical hunt on Deanne and King to make them weaker, and was laughing at them.
That actually does happen, but later. In the initial part of the fight, Bon just takes out all the scrubs, basically. All the little vampires that were basically citizens of this place that were turned into vampires. Which you find out there's no cure for it, so he did have to kill them. outside of just casually committing mass murder on accident.
I'm sure he tried very hard to find a solution to that.
He did not. He saw them and killed them all on sight. Yeah, so he does the suck thing of the energy, this physical hunt that you talked about, but after he has to deal with a different vampire. The vampire in question is, ironically, a different, small girl. So, not his wife, but, or his girlfriend or whatever, but, a different small girl with, magic psychic abilities. That also happens to be interested in his blood. He gets taken out by this vampire. We don't know what happens to him. They kind of just take him out of commission and just kind of start sucking his blood out. And they're freaking out because his blood is infused with, the elixir of immortality. And they're like, this is the best quality blood I've ever had in my entire unlife. And I've lived for centuries. This is incredible. And Bond's like, yeah, thanks. My blood's pretty cool. I would like it back, though. And he's, out of commission there. We see, Diane and King kind of interact with each other for a little bit. They don't notice that they're having a difficulty fighting people until, they start losing when they normally wouldn't be. And that's when they find out that Bond has just stolen all of their physical strength for himself. And he didn't even need it to fight. He did it just to make the fight take longer because he's being a dick. He kills the vampire that was sucking his blood by actually overinflating them with blood. Because since he's immortal, right, he technically produces an infinite amount of blood. So they just kept drinking without realizing. They drink too much, they can't move, Bond punches them, and they pop like a mosquito. It's really gross, but, reasonable way to fight a vampire, right? If you have the resource, you do it. When the other, sins are having their shenanigans and everything, we meet, Escanor. He's kind of summoned over by Meliodas, just kind of casually saying, hey, Escanor, come over here and you can help us fight. So we meet Escanor for the first time in this flashback, and he's kind of this, I don't want to call him a twink, but, he's just a really tall, kind of lanky kind of dude. He has a little bit of definition here and there, them teenage muscles, but he's a very unimposing figure. A really interesting detail they add to his design here is the fact that he has super baggy clothing. And you think for a sec, it's to make him look more pathetic and less intimidating. But then you realize there's probably a reason for all of these really baggy clothes. And before he can find out what Escanor's whole deal is, asks the captain, hey, where'd you go? I need to, stay with you because it's really dangerous for me right now. And, Meliodas is just gone. He's not there at all. And the King of the Vampires is just looming behind him. The King of the Vampires, right? No matter what you might think in your mind what a vampire looks like, take that away and replace it with, a 16-foot tall, hairy Goliath that has fangs. The King of the Vampires is absolutely massive. And he's jacked because it's 7 Deadly Sins, and the mangaka really doesn't know how to make guys that aren't jacked. And if they aren't jacked, they're old. And if they're not old, they're Gother. So, there's really no in between with the art style here. So you have this, super jacked, giant guy with, a mane of black hair and vampire fangs. And he's, obviously the King of the Vampires. He seems to be the strongest one or whatever. He's attacking, Escanor. And Escanor's not fighting back at all. Even though he's allegedly the strongest one of them or whatever. But there is, a little bit of a compliment given to him. Apparently, the Vampire King is impressed that Escanor can even dodge the attacks that he's doing at him. Because these are presumably very powerful and very fast techniques. And Escanor hasn't gotten hit by any of them. He's just really good at dodging for whatever reason. Which might hint at potential abilities, but I think it's mostly just to emphasize how much of a coward he is right now. Just a quick little side tangent over to Meliodas fighting against 2 vampire sisters or whatever. One of them happens to be a big-tittied waifu of his younger brother or whatever, and it doesn't matter. There's other fights going on that aren't nearly as important as the one that is important, which is the one between Escanor and the Vampire King. So, Escanor and the Vampire King are fighting with each other, right? And the Vampire King finally manages to get a single blow off on Escanor. We don't know why it happened, but I'm assuming it happened on purpose, and he let it happen, because when he gets hit by the attack, the only thing he responds with is that your full power? Even though we just saw these attacks, cutting boulders and stuff in half, and Escanor dodging for his, dear life to get out of the way. But he gets hit directly with it, leaves him without a scratch, and he asks if that is his full power. The Vampire King, right, is just basically okay, hold on a second. Wait a minute. I just tried to kill you, and you were just running away, like a coward for, the last hour. What happened? Why are you asking me, to use my full power against someone as weak as you? So Escanor just kind of brushes it off. It's like, you know what? Good for you. You should just start using full power then, because I'm going to say one more thing. Apologize to me that you were born into my world. And that's like one of the coolest lines any character has ever said to anybody else ever. That's so cool. And that's when we first really understand the moniker, right? For Escanor. He is the lion sin of pride. In the fact that he takes that really to heart. He is quite literally the most important being in the universe to himself at a certain point. And it seems like we're finding out what that point is. So after he says this badass line, apologize to me that you were born into my world, we see that he's a bit taller, which is weird. That shouldn't happen. And we see he's a little bit buffer, which is also kind of weird, but a little less weird than being taller, honestly. The Vampire King assumes he's bluffing. He's like, okay, whatever. No human being can compare to me, especially one starting off as weak as you, right? So he's like, you were so terrified, you must have gone crazy, or whatever, I'll give you, your wish, I'll show you my full power to kill you. And he uses a technique called impurity, which we find out is basically what he used to keep the city dark. It's a technique that is so dark and so black that it kind of just sucks all the light out of an area and kills any biological life that's there. We just see a clever, representation of this with like a mouse trying to run away and it gets cut in half, right? But inside of this dark, pit, where apparently no light can form, the darkness is expelled immediately, and the Vampire King just starts getting blasted with a wave of energy. And he's like, what the hell happened? It's like, you're not dead, and my darkness is gone. Sunlight can't even consume my darkness. What happened? Escanor whips out another banger. In this realm, kings such as yourself are numerous as grains of sand, but I am no such thing. I am in existence unlike any other in this world, the lion sin of pride, Lord Escanor. After announcing himself as an individual to the highest degree, he just starts throwing hands with the Vampire King and casually cuts him once with his axe as a fading attack, which almost cuts him in half. So the king's upset about that. He's like, that kind of sucks, but I'm a vampire. I can regenerate. Duh. So he closes himself up to regenerate, and then suddenly his body bursts into flames. He's like, wait a minute. Whoa, hold on. Is this fire? When did you use magic on me? He's like, also, why is this fire hurting me? I'm a vampire king. I'm the vampire king. Fire doesn't normally harm me. This burns hotter than demon fire. What the hell are you? We find out, through various, hype that the other, sins kind of talk about with Escanor, that as the day gets, changes, right, and the sun goes up, Escanor gets exponentially stronger. And his power is derived actually from sunlight. So that explains why he's so dangerous against the Vampire King. But that's not even the beginning of it. Because the Vampire King does a technique where he wraps himself over darkness to protect himself specifically from sunlight, and it doesn't work. Escanor starts melting away his sunlight, or his armor with the light coming off his body, and he's actually liquefying the ground that he's standing on top of. So, it might be a little less that he's empowered by the sun, and he's actually just the sun. Just standing in front of you. It's absolutely terrifying, and he gets beefier and beefier. He does something either really intimidating or just really weird, and he starts reciting poetry, but specifically a love poem to another character in the series. He doesn't actually explain himself here. He just kind of recites a love poem, and the Vampire King's like, what the hell is this? Is this an incantation? Are you casting a spell? He's like, incantation? How dare you call my poem an incantation? He gets upset at the fact that he even proposes that this love poem he made was an incantation, and he starts walking closer. He doesn't do anything special. He just walks up next to the guy, and you see the Vampire King's hair's all gone. His skin is literally melting off of his flesh, and it's so hot he can't even breathe anymore because the oxygen's burned away. And the only thing the Vampire King can say to him is, spare me. And Escanor, after a single slight of his poetry being seen as incantation, which honestly is reasonable if you're the Vampire King from this perspective, from the single slight, he changes his mind and doesn't want to make it like a fair fight. He doesn't want to spare his life. And instead, he decides to just kill him. And he doesn't even use the technique. He just says boom, which I'm assuming is like a pop out of your mouth of air, which causes a massive explosion of sunlight and energy, which dispels all the darkness in this area, kills the Vampire King, and liquefies the ground he's standing on to such a high degree, it turns into glass and freezes in place as a structure that's so large that it actually stays into the main series, and people see it later, and they don't know how it got there. So we learned that Escanor made this just by using, like, a fraction of his power to kill the Vampire King and all the rest of the vampires forever. He's so strong that he almost threatens to potentially be a problem for the rest of the Sins, and they have to knock him out. We find out, about Escanor's abilities, and that he kind of regrets his monstrous strength and, everything related to him in these chapters. It sets up the backstory and the relationship between the Sins with each other, and it's very cool. I highly suggest you do read, Seven Deadly Sins, and if you ever get to the point where you get introduced to Escanor, I want you to read this extra chapter. And when you're done with the series, I want you to read it again. But with full appreciation for what Escanor is and what he can do. Quite a treat to read this again. Words can only do so much. The art in Seven Deadly Sins, or at least the manga anyway, is very good. Conveys a lot of, of the energy and everything that's in the chapters and in the battles and stuff. So that's basically all I have to say about that.
That definitely captures the over-the-top nature that Seven Deadly Sins is known for.
Yeah, for everything. Not just Escanor, but also the other characters involved as well.
Especially since they call back to the Battle of Edinburgh quite a bit. Like I said, with that one scene that where Gowther reads Bond's mind about stealing King and Diane's strength, and we see Edinburgh. That's like where the Ten Commandments are hanging out later on in the series when they show up.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, like the location becomes significant too. It's also the first. It's also the location of where Meliodas did one of his big power plays too. Because after Escanor blows, causes the place to liquefy, you just see a giant column of black energy reach into space, and there's just a crater now that we don't know where it came from. And apparently it's Meliodas, but we don't know why and how that happened
until later on.
Yeah, and then we know why it happened, and it's really cool.
Yeah. But we'll save that for the people who want to read it.
Seven Deadly Sins. Exactly. It's definitely worth it. And honestly, compared to the other shonen series that are, long running, it's not even that long of a read.
Yeah, I mean, the ending kind of drags out. You think it's over, and then it's not over, and then you think it's over again.
And then it's also not over. Yeah,
I got One Punch Man, and I chose Volume 2 instead of Volume 1, because I knew Volume 1 was going to be very samey. It was going to be just the gag of, Saitama punches people.
And they die. Wow.
Yeah. This one starts with the House of Evolution story, and it goes into the Speed of Sound Sonic section. Two pretty, not incredibly interesting parts of it, but it definitely works in terms of misdirection, at least for the House of Evolution one, where this doctor who was so brilliant, so genius, he managed to stop himself from aging, and he made dozens of clones of himself, and he made a research facility with a bunch of weird animal cyborg hybrids. And he sent a bunch of them to attack Saitama because he's so nebulous of a being. He's how do you get this strong? Because that's sort of a big part in the beginning of One Punch Man. It's how do you do this? You punched Purple Piccolo to death in one hit in the first chapter. What are you?
And apparently that creature in the first chapter was sent by Mother Earth itself to purge humanity. Whether or not he was telling the truth is impossible to tell now.
That's what sort of this chapter is all about. It's what did you do? And we find out once Saitama goes to square up against the...
not Caribou, it's...
Carnage Kabuto.
Kabuto, yeah.
The big bad of the House of Evolution.
Giant beetle boy.
And
big buff Beetleborg.
Saitama's secret is just a pretty simple strength workout.
Yeah, it's famous at this point, actually.
It's 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a
10-kilometer run every day.
Yeah. Now,
that's it.
Now, some people think, and I'm kind of in this realm of thinking too, because of the way the One Punch Man world is structured, where if you obsess over something, then you can become a monster that's based off of that
obsession.
Yeah. So Saitama's was to be strong and become a hero that can beat anyone. So people think that he became a monster who's just like, fight anyone, beat them. Because, like, you know, there's in the first chapter, there's Crablante, the guy who became a crab man because he ate so much
many crab. Yeah.
And
don't know where the underwear came from, but, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he was probably wearing underwear.
No, he exclusively ate crab when he was naked. Or, like, in his underwear, I guess. And he became a giant underwear-wearing crab monster.
Yeah, I guess.
Who almost killed Ballsack Chin Man. Or boy, actually.
Ballsack Chin Boy.
Yeah, my bad. He's not a man yet.
The House of Evolution thing sort of brings up the question of how did he get this strong, and then... It
kind of just gives us the joke.
Yeah.
Although, if you take it seriously, because of the way that the universe works, he might have actually just done that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was difficult for him. Like, for a normal person, it wouldn't be super difficult, but for him, maybe he was pushing himself to the absolute limit to do that every day.
When I say that this would be a very difficult workout for me, I mean it. Probably not for the average person.
I'm not even going to say average person, because 100 push-ups and sit-ups is far above the standard for a regular person.
Yeah, I guess.
But that's every day. It also depends on your own body weight and physical dimensions. If you're a short, small, light person, sit-ups, squats, and push-ups are easy because you don't weigh a lot. And the run is even easy. So, like, it really depends.
But, and then the Speed of Sound Sonic one starts up this issue of getting licensed and becoming, like, a real hero. Because, like, Saitama's just been, like, doing this as, like, a side whatever, you know?
Which is why he's effectively homeless.
I mean,
His apartment is free because nobody lives there. He lives in the dead zone of the city, which he accidentally caused himself, we find out. He's like, oh wow, that city is filled with giant monsters. And all the monsters say, that city is filled with one monster that kills all the giant monsters that live there. Exactly. And Saitama's the giant monster that kills the monsters that live there. But no humans or monsters want to live there, so he just kind of has an entire city to himself rent-free.
But then he gets a bunch of freeloaders coming in as the series progresses.
Yeah, you can't get anything in City Z.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then we get introduced to Speed of Sound Sonic. I'm trying to think of a good comparison for... He's kind of like Buggy, in where, like, he keeps showing up again and again, but, like, the main characters don't take him seriously.
Yeah, but he thinks of himself as a big deal, though, so it's a little different. Because I'm pretty sure Buggy doesn't actually think he's a big deal. He wants other people to think he's a big deal, but I don't think he believes his own thing. Speed of Sound Sonic 100% believes his own hype.
Yeah, he does.
Like, you know, if he could get a pin-up of himself, he probably would.
We also,
Oh, yeah, like the guys with, like, the superpower armor or whatever. Which is just simple armor for one to draw, and when it was transcribed into this much better art style, it's still really simple and just kind of bulbous black, you know, armor. It's like Mega Man's armor.
The Paradisers.
I can see why you forgot. Yeah.
We get introduced to Hammerhead and the Paradisers. The weird, like, shadow organization that, like...
that they got the armor from? Yeah. Well, the Paradise's entire shtick is that the leader was just too lazy to get a job. So he decided to become a terrorist instead.
Yeah.
And he got this super armor from another organization that was just kind of handing them out to stupid people.
Did they work with, what's his name, Metal Knight or whatever?
Yeah, it might have been like Foboy or whatever, the scientist.
Because they don't work for...
Oh, they were testing it out, actually. They weren't even supposed to use the armor for evil or whatever. They were just testing it to see the quality and durability of it.
Yeah, because they definitely didn't work for the Monster Association because they didn't exist at that point.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, I probably could have picked, like, chapter or volume 3 or whatever if I really wanted to get into, like, the nitty-gritty of things and not just, like, joke chapters, but... I'm not sure what I really expected from One Punch Man. It being a joke series is kind of... It's kind of its whole thing until, like, about halfway through, I think.
Yeah, when some of the plot lines that were set up kind of start catching up with itself.
Though it does get kind of annoying after a while, because it's like, oh, man, Saitama should just, like, be everywhere, but he's not.
Yeah. Okay, so it has kind of, like, the same problem... Well, not really problem. It has the same life cycle as Dragon Ball, where Dragon Ball started off as a gag manga, too. And it slowly became a more serious battle shonen. One Punch Man seems a bit more abrupt, because honestly, the humor in One Punch Man starting off is better than OG Dragon Ball.
It, like, spikes.
Yeah, from the complete joke to serious.
Immediately. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, is this the volume that has the test? You know, for the Hero Association?
It does not.
Oh.
It ends...
It's one of the best chapters.
Yeah, it ends with them like going to go register.
Oh, so right before. Okay, so the beginning of 3 would be that one. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's One Punch Man Volume 2.
Would you recommend?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'm gonna have to buy Volume 1 now because it's gonna look weird on my shelf with
just a half number in between.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah.
That's how you curse somebody who's never been reading manga, by the way. You buy them like Volume 7 of something, and now they have to buy 1 through 6 at least.
Don't you ever do that to me.
I might, if I think the series is worth it.
For the podcast Christmas party or whatever.
So here, I'm going to give you Volume 17 of this random series you've never seen before.
I'd be so pissed. How many series have 17 volumes?
Not many.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of them are honestly pretty bad. Oh, I could give you Volume 17 of Tsubasa. That one has 30 volumes, and they're all just shoujo garbage.
Oh god. I'd probably just burn it.
You might actually, it might be worth more to you to just do that. Heat your house with it for a little bit.
Put it on the Yule log.
Ah, yes, smells like ink.
And let's move on to our main topic of the day. I wanted to do this one simply because of my experience on the online forum, if you will.
Yeah, okay.
And this is sort of the ins and outs, the ABCs of versus battles.
Yes. We're not going into the weeds of it this time. We could always at a later date, but we're just doing the simple basics first of the random structure that seems to kind of perforate through the anime and manga community. Well, and also just kind of entertainment as a whole, honestly. It's not just manga and anime. And
we'll probably do a special where put on a Twitter, a tweet or whatever, asking you guys for
specific matchups, yeah.
But that is not this day, unfortunately.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get the classics, like Superman versus Goku, Saitama versus anybody, all of that.
I think an important opener is based on the rules, the rules and regulations for a versus battle. And I always go by the guidelines of the Weekly Planet. If you guys like comic books as much as like manga and anime,
that's a great place.
You should definitely check them out. But their stipulations are: the two characters appear on a standard-sized American football field on either end. They immediately see the other person, acknowledge them as a threat, and would go about dealing with them as they normally would. Batman would aim to incapacitate while
trying to learn something about them. Yeah.
Well, someone like Frieza would just shoot to kill. They have whatever standardized equipment they usually have on them.
So, Naruto would have his jumpsuit, but he wouldn't have, the super-sized scroll that he had, when he fought Pain or whatever.
Yeah, but he'd still have his, kunais and shurikens and stuff like that.
Yeah, just nothing super specific or specialized.
I'd say, Dragon Ball Goku would have his power pole, but not Z Goku.
Not Z Goku, yeah. And none of them would have senzu beans on them, because that's just not something he carries with him.
Yeah, no. But yeah, speaking of Goku, I think he's probably been the biggest
target of versus things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because even the Superman thing, because Superman's another really popular target, but the funny thing is the versus community seems to be mainly rooted in manga and anime. There's a couple of them in comic books, obviously, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But it's definitely bigger, notably bigger in anime and manga, which means Goku's most likely going to have more pairings than someone like Superman.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it makes sense for Goku, right? He's always looking for a fight.
Yeah, he's already a fighty, putchy boy anyway.
He's a martial artist. He's got transformations that give him multipliers left and right and center. It seems...
He's got numbers, he's got feats, everything a versus person would ever want, right?
Exactly. And there's obviously the meme going around in the anime community, the Dragon Ball fans who are always, responding to different characters with, he can't beat Goku. He can't beat Goku. This and this, that, and the other thing, And not everybody isn't just, going around saying, oh, this character can't beat Goku, this character can't beat Goku.
You always get at least one of those that kind of just pops up every now and then.
Yeah. And then there's obviously the counter trolls that are like, oh, Sailor Moon could beat Goku. Simone could beat Goku.
Oh, but joking ones or ones that people use?
I guess both.
There's one that I personally like, which is that Arale could beat Goku.
I mean, yeah.
And honestly, they probably could.
Fair enough.
Right? I mean, you got the... I saw one for... So when Animal Crossing and Doom came out, I saw one for... Annabelle is the dog?
Isabelle.
Yeah, Isabelle beating Goku. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
You just fishhook him and, fishhook his tail and just rip it out.
I mean, where do you stand on the whole, Goku's undefeatability?
Okay, so, as far as the general consensus with Mr. Sun, or Son Goku, it makes a lot of sense as to why he's used in versus battles. Outside of his media, being really well suited for that particular type of, matchup, the character itself also happens to be very well suited for a random deathmatch. So, Batman, for example, is a character that people love to put in versus battles, when honestly, he's a pretty terrible target for a versus battle. Because, the biggest benefit that Batman has is that he's the world's greatest detective. I mean, honestly, if we're being completely real, he's the universe's best detective. In his universe, he's a better detective than gods of intelligence, which should be impossible, actually. It's not just insane, that should be impossible. But he's the best detective. And being a detective takes time. And versus battles don't really give you time. A lot of versus battles end with a term called blitzing, when an opponent is so much faster than you that they kill you before you can respond to them in any way. And Batman, unfortunately, gets blitzed by basically everybody. It's not even just the fact that Batman is slower than a lot of these fictional characters. It's also the fact that his usefulness increases with time. The longer he is aware of his opponent and their abilities, the more effective he becomes in combat. But unless he gets that time, he's going to lose every time. Goku, as a character, is inherently very good at fighting at the spur of the moment. I mean, this man is ready to throw hands whenever. You could have somebody just try punching him in the face or shooting him with a gun while he's doing this, and he can respond in time. So, because of his readiness to always fight, and because of his minimal loadout, which is also something that people don't really take into account, Goku's loadout is basically just weighted training clothes. And that's it. The man's just got weighted training clothes, and that's it. Oh, and his lucky bracelets. Because of his minimal loadout and the fact that he's ready to basically kill on sight whenever, he's perfect for versus situations. The versus scenario here is, football field, they pop in, they see each other, recognize each other as a threat, and go on to attack each other as they would. Goku does that with basically anybody. If you're not a regular civilian that has no ki, right, and has no sign of, any type of aggression towards him, he basically doesn't even recognize you as an existence. He doesn't even think you're real. But if he sees somebody for the first time, Goku saw Hit for the first time in that tournament, and his eyes were like, but you're there? He was already ready to fight Hit the moment he laid eyes on that weird penis, head-shaped man. Goku is perfect for these types of fights. And he also has another factor to him that makes him perfect for these fights too, which is the fact that his powers are really easily quantified. And now I'll put a caveat with easy, because nothing when it comes to power scaling is actually easy. Unless the thing you're power scaling has objective numbers that are made by the author, it's all just hearsay. You have to do the math with the mountains that the characters destroy, even though the authors never actually know how much energy it takes to destroy a mountain, and they might think it's cool if a character drop kicks and destroys a mountain once, which is why you get situations like random character who's able to just level a mountain, but only for a single panel, and never shows anything above a regular human ever again. You get that type of stuff all the time, but in Dragon Ball, it is relatively easy because the power system there is multiplicative. We have actual numbers to work with, and that is amazing. Most of the time, you don't get that privilege. You get the thing that says, when this person transforms into this thing, he gets stronger. That's it. That's the whole statement. They get stronger. A character that I actually think about with these, particular power things that you need to worry about is actually Beast Boy from DC Comics. So Beast Boy is a person who's basically just a really acrobatic human, right, who has the ability to transform into different animals. We can't even use regular animals to scale how strong he is, because he's shown feats stronger than that regular animal when he's transformed into it. His transformations are already kind of vague to begin with, and there's a transformation he does that's even more vague. He has a transformation which is essentially Bigfoot. He turns into a Sasquatch. And that form is like Primal Beast Boy, where he's stronger and faster than regular Beast Boy. And that's basically all we get. We have no hard numbers to really work with. We know he's faster and stronger than him. And that's it. But Goku, when he transforms, we know it's 50 times, 2 times, 3 times, 10 times. It's there. We get numbers. That is only kind of reasonable because Goku's numbers multiply based off what he starts at. And what he starts at is contentious. Really contentious. Very few people can agree at what Goku's baseline is. And especially considering the manga is still going on, and the author just keeps making him stronger. So the baseline just keeps getting higher. Which means, eventually, it's gonna be theoretically impossible to beat Goku at his full potential, because he doesn't really have full potential, because he's kind of limitless, right? That's the argument. The big argument against Superman and Goku. Goku has limitless potential, but, Superman has limitless power. Like, did they meet in the middle? Did they one outclass the other? Whatever.
I think that's another good point, the Superman versus Goku thing. I've heard this said a bunch of times. The reason that Superman wins that is purely because Superman's been around since, the 40s. And he's had dozens and dozens of writers over the years that can never agree on what the fuck Superman does.
And for the people who think that it's unfair to use all versions of Superman at the same time, that's true, but also that's implying that we use all the versions of Goku at the same time too. Now hold on, I get it, Goku's the same character, he's been written the same way or whatever. There's a lot of different things that you could put into these factors as to whether or not you want to quantify Goku at a certain point to fight them, what Goku's actual true potential is, because unlike Goku, Superman has actually had completed storylines. He's had, a comic book where he starts doing one thing and he ends that thing, and we never see that version of Superman ever again. This character has lived and died before, not just literally, but also figuratively as a version of Superman. You kind of have to use all of his abilities as one composite character, otherwise you're gonna be flinging random versions of Superman left and right at him, and some versions of Superman effectively are gods. Actually gods. To the point where they're omnipotent. Which really isn't fair, but kind of has to be. It's unfortunate.
And another thing, a quote by one of the late great Stan Lee, any versus battle can be decided by who's writing it.
Oh, easily.
So, for instance, if I'm writing Meliodas versus Naruto, if I really wanted Meliodas to win, I could just say, all chakra is basically just magic. And his full counter could work on all of Naruto's jutsus, and his counter advantage could work on all of that, and Naruto would basically just be fighting Meliodas hand to hand.
And is not really a contest.
Not even remotely. But if I wanted Naruto to win, I could say that, chakra doesn't go through, and that
functions differently.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And if anything, you could say demon magic is like nature magic, and he can use Sage Mode to absorb Meliodas' ability, or whatever.
Exactly.
Random nonsense, yeah.
There's no limit to what a writer could possibly justify for if they want a certain character to win. And there's nothing wrong with that.
The crux to the whole issue here, and I'm only going to say issue because this does seem to pop up a lot in versus communities, the crux of the issue here is the fact that because these are battles, that we are trying to have two characters fight with each other, we kind of want an objective winner, even though it's not really possible with fictional characters that don't have very tightly and consistently defined abilities. If you wanted a really satisfying versus battle, you'd have real-life athletes fight each other. It's just called the MMA, and you can go and just watch that if you want a really accurate versus battle. You got people's weights that we can observe, you got their training you can see on the daily, and you got their fight record with each other that you can see. But these are fictional characters. It's not really something you can do. You can't actually look into the lives of these characters without asking the authors. And unfortunately, for anybody who would even bother trying, I don't know why you would, these creators don't care. You could ask them night and day, and people do, about, this character, what do they eat for breakfast? How much can this character bench? They never give you an answer. And when they do, they give you vague answers, or, maybe one, and then they regret their decision immediately, because then they get bombarded with more, and they never answer anything ever again. These kind of have to be based off of subjective opinion.
Why do you think Oda only answers penis and boob questions? Yeah,
he doesn't do anything, because he knows that lewd questions are honestly less of a minefield than versus questions like this.
Exactly.
This community is very large, and it's fun casually. There are definitely instances of it becoming a bit too involved and just ending toxic. I think the best that people can really get to is that when you get both to be as close to objective as you can, and then you just simply agree to disagree with the result after adding your opinion. That's the best that you can really ever ask for.
Now that we've sort of gotten the mechanics of versus battles, I kind of want to run through some some conditions in versus battles. I want to hear your opinions on it.
Yeah, sure.
So first one, immortality in versus battles.
Oh, should it be banned or is it?
Or like what's the verdict on it? Like Hidan, Bond, Meliodas. Like what's sort of the 4-1-1 on that? What do you think about immortality?
So for immortality, I suppose the versus battle, because versus battles are almost always to the death. By the way, they should get like a stipulation in the fact that it's not the first to kill because you can't kill them. Mm-hmm. It's like an auto win. So instead of getting into kill, it's the first to completely nullify the opponent. So for the Hidan example, even in his own universe,
just cut the head off. Yeah.
Yeah, and he can't do anything because he's useless. He's just a corpse that doesn't die. And for like Meliodas, right? If you can manage to sap all of his magic away and pin him to the ground where he can't move, battle's done. That's not a battle anymore. You're just babysitting an immortal dude.
But what about Bond?
Bond, because he can absorb abilities from other people. I mean, honestly, you'd probably just wait for him to clock out. And then he just kind of overheats and you wait.
That is a really fucking like tough.
Oh, it is a tough clock out. Yeah, you gotta stick it in there. But if you're both immortal, it's just whoever taps out first.
Yeah.
Or whoever's, pinned down. You basically just end up doing wrestling. It becomes wrestling when they're both immortal. Whoever can pin down the opponent first and keep him from going anywhere. Not actually pinned down, you could grip them in the air. As long as they're no longer a threat, the battle's over.
Also, the idea of the football field, it's in like a pocket universe. Separate from like both of whatever people's universes.
So they can't just run out of the field to go to their house or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's kind of like in the void from like the Tournament of Power.
Yeah. Just think of it as like the giant floating kachin arena or whatever in Dragon Ball Super,
which does affect quite a few things. Superman can't get yellow sun radiation.
Yes, but because it's a versus fight, we're assuming that he's at full power already. So.
But he can't maintain that radiation.
That's fair. But then again, Goku wouldn't be able to maintain his power either, because technically speaking, he has a finite level of energy. Yeah. But the androids would have a huge advantage.
The Infinity Stones don't work.
Yeah, because you're not in the right location for that.
Exactly. They don't work outside of their own universe.
That's a no-go.
Thanos is kind of...
Well, not even. Thanos is fine, honestly.
I mean, yeah.
Because in the comics, whenever he actually gets the Infinity Gauntlet, he just wins. Or loses really badly, because Thanos is a complete fuck up in the comics.
Yeah.
Honestly, his biggest win was in the movie. Like, when he gets it, though, either he wins or he loses, like, on that moment. He doesn't even need the gauntlet most of the time. He kind of just does his own thing by himself. We've already seen that he's physically competent enough as a warrior to just fight off everybody. Mm. Even though I honestly think he should have been able to just kill Captain America real easy. He outboxed the Hulk without a weapon, and he was hitting Captain America full force with a sword that was able to cut through his shield. Even if Captain America tried to block the sword, he'd get crushed by the Force. Like, I get it, he's stronger than a regular human, but that's getting a little ridiculous. That or the Hulk is just really weak in the movies. So, immortality has to be separate arena.
Different universe, yeah. I'm trying to think of any other, like, interesting...
like, caveats that are added onto it.
Yeah. I don't know, what do you think?
What about mind control?
Mind control? That's an interesting one.
Because there's different kinds, Some of them are based off of, like, consuming blood, or, like, a potion or something.
Or there's a condition to it.
Yeah, or they just have psychic abilities that straight up let them do it, like, Professor Xavier, for example. Because does it end as soon as they get their minds taken over? Or do they have to kill themselves first?
The caveat of the Weekly Planet rules is that they proceed however they would normally. So, like, someone like Professor Xavier probably wouldn't want to kill their opponent.
Well, it's a death match.
It's a versus match.
Oh, well, then I guess the moment they have them under their control, they win then. Because they never were going to kill him anyway.
But now, like...
Unless it's Onslaught Xavier, in which case, he's going to lobotomize that motherfucker as soon as he gets a chance. Just smoothly brain them.
But then, like, say like something like Midoriya versus Shinso happens in this scenario. Does he automatically lose, or does he get the chance to, like, blow up his fingers?
Well, okay, so if we're going to be honest, that entire thing was kind of bullshit. He should have won, right? The whole finger banging thing in this situation really doesn't count. Because if it's a proper versus match, they should have lost in and there.
I mean, like, it's a step out of the arena match, though, for that one.
Yeah, for that one. Well, I mean, it depends on the rules. This match is just the first to lose/die. In this instance, the loss should come at the moment the person is incapacitated, which includes mind control. So as long as it affects them, they should just lose. And we're forcing it to be death matches unless they're immortal. then it's entirely case by case. Because some forms of mind control are more absolute than others. Obviously, that form of mind control seems to be a soft one. It's under the assumption that if you just kind of hit him with a water gun even, it would break him out of it. You just need some outside stimulus to stop them from doing it.
What about the shadow possession jutsu?
That's entirely dependent on the chakra, so I think that's fine. I don't think there's any issues with it.
But I mean, like, if...
It'll be difficult to kill your opponent with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if Shikamaru gets you...
Even shadow stitching's not that reliable.
It's kind of reliable.
But we don't know how sharp it is. Like, could it pierce the Hulk? Like, just because it keeps him in place doesn't mean it could stab him. And because of his regeneration, does it even... Immobility doesn't automatically mean victory. Because if your opponent is invulnerable, then fucking whatever, man. Now I just have to wait. I'll wait until you tire yourself out, and then I can kill you.
Oh, I remember now. What's the 411 on stands?
Well, they're basically just summons.
What abilities can people use to see them?
Oh, okay. None.
Really?
I'll be honest, I think stands should only be seen by other stand users, like in the universe. It makes sense.
You don't think that hockey could detect stands?
Hockey is different, because it's not detecting stands, you're kind of detecting presences. Like, you wouldn't be able to see what Star Platinum looks like, but you'd see the outline of him.
That's sort of like what
pressure. Okay, so there's a standardized, death battle formula that exists. A show with the namesake, of death battles. So there have been stands in death battle already, and in death battle, they dictated that stands are basically like life energy. So if a character can detect life energy of any kind, whether that be ki, spirits, that type of thing, then it works. I think that logic checks out, but because of the way that JoJo's works, I think it would make more sense if instead of them detecting the stand itself, if you can detect the space that the stand inhabits, that's good enough. If you had like Superman's like supervision, for example, and you couldn't see a stand, but you can see a disturbance of, like, frequencies where something is, like, inhabiting a space. That's good enough. You don't see the details of the character, but you can see the outline, the general visage of it. It's like trying to fight Mr. Game & Watch. You're not going to know what his face looks like, but you can definitely punch him. Like, a silhouette is enough.
Yeah, Nen users too, probably.
Yeah, because they can also detect the space. Because, what is it? We've seen people using, like, advanced N or whatever, right, when they expand their field. And they can just sense like a box somewhere. Or even in the dark room with Maribel discovering where everyone is hiding. You could just sense their body's presence, but he didn't exactly know who it was. He had to ask. So it's the same general idea. And it's also a death battle. So it's a versus match. So like, they wouldn't get confused by sensing a presence there. They're like, oh, different enemy. Got it. Gonna fight them. Like, they wouldn't get surprised or confused by the stand. Well, unless it's the ones that are like explicitly confusing and surprising, because those do exist.
I don't think we have time to discuss.
Yeah, the JoJo power system is probably the most wild out of all the ones that exist in fiction. Like, maybe, period. Like, obviously comic books are expansive, right? And there's going to be examples of weird shit everywhere. In one isolated universe, JoJo might actually have the craziest power sets.
But I think Nen takes...
Not necessarily crazy isn't good, just, like, specific.
I think Nen takes most confusing, though.
That's mostly because the writing doesn't make it extremely clear.
It does not.
Which makes it more confusing. But that's less the power system and more on the writer's inability to explain his own power system.
Oh, speaking of that, is there a power system in Toriko?
Yes, there is. It's the calorie system. So they use calories to define everything. But outside of calories, every character basically has his own power set. But ultimately, the only consistent things that exist are food honor, which is to say... their equivalent of, like... It's not even key for them, actually. Food honor is just a technique which allows you to optimize your ability. It makes it so that the calories they can consume is greater, so their mana pool gets bigger when they have food honor, and the efficiency of their mana also goes up. But that's it. Like, the things that change are, like, because people's power sets are so specific to each other, like Zebura, my favorite character. So his entire deal is that all of his attacks are effectively AoE. So he does, like, AoE crowd control techniques that do, like, crazy amounts of damage. And they're all sound-based. So, with Food Honor for him, he basically just uses less calories to use his ridiculous AoE attacks. But for someone like Toriko, which does, like, more direct attacks, like his knife and fork, attacks, those basically translate to, you can use knife and fork, or his nail punch. You use it just with more force. That's it. So, he translates, like... calories directly to power in his universe. So Food Honor just allows him to be more cost effective with it. But they don't really have a set power system for everybody outside of just calories, you know? Well, until you get to, like, God or whatever, but their powers are nebulous at best. People break past the laws of reality to punch God in the face. I think Toriko does, like, a 1,000 nail punch or whatever with the collective energy of humanity. It's stupid, but whatever, you know, it's just the way it is. But that actually is a good point, though. Not every universe for versus battles has a power system, which makes it even harder to actually gauge how strong these characters are. In addition to all, like, these ridiculous feats that happen occasionally, I honestly think that outlier feats should be excluded. So, like, if a character like Sanji, for example, showed the strength to lift a ship up with his one leg and kick it at somebody like a projectile, but he never does that again, or anything similar to that again, I don't think that should be included in his abilities.
Really?
Really. Well, because there's a lot of... The reason I say this is because writers have a really hard time being consistent, especially with characters that like to be in these battles. Which is to say, characters that have either long-running novelizations or serializations, or are reoccurring characters in an overarching franchise. So, like, Iron Man has so many iterations to his character and the abilities that he has access to, right, with his armors and everything. If one writer decides that his basic suit, which all of them have, does something that none of the other writers agree with, it shouldn't be included.
But I mean, like, him lifting the ship with the cake on it, that's not something that Sanji's capable of doing, even though he does do it.
Well, no, if he does something else similar, that should be good enough.
But I mean, like, it's the one time he does that.
Oh, if he only does it one time in the entire series, then probably no. But if he does something else greater consistently, then yes, it's included. You know, it's like a blanket thing. This guy can totally lift 100 pounds. Why? Well, because he lifts 200 pounds every day.
If I lift 100 pounds...
once in your life.
Then that doesn't mean I can't lift 100 pounds.
Yeah, but I don't think you could do it consistently enough for a battle.
But, like, I'm still able to do it.
Yeah, but I wouldn't make that a major point of an argument, though. You know what I mean? I would still consider it an outlier. I'm thinking about this as scientifically as I can, dude.
But I mean, like, outliers are still, like, results.
They are, but they're not reliable results for averages. And we're trying to go for averages here, because when they do the fights, they don't ever say it's guaranteed one or the other. It's always more times out of another number of times. Maybe it's like a 100 out of 200 fights, or like a 99 out of 100 fights they win. No matter which one it is, there's always a chance the other thing happens. Right?
I don't prescribe to death battles, results, and whatnot.
Well, I'm not saying you need to subscribe to the results. Their
methods are questionable at best.
That is also fair. But even if you don't subscribe to their methods or the results, I still think their approach to outliers is reasonable. Where the outlier shouldn't be the deciding factor. So, like, if the outlier isn't a deciding factor, and everything else about this character dictates they'd be strong enough to defeat them, then it doesn't matter, include it. Fuck it, whatever. But if that's the last thing that it takes, if nothing else about this character is able to overcome the other guy, besides this one thing they did this one time, I don't really think that counts. That's just this is just the basics, the outline, the general topic of verses.
Yeah.
We're not going into anything specific here, because, no time for that, and that's not what this was about. Well, if we ever want to do this again, we can put up a poll somewhere, get some people, give us some suggestions, and we can go through them later.
Now that we're done with that, I guess we can now move on to the spinning wheel. We should actually pick who's gonna get this one before we actually spin it.
Yes.
Alright, I think I'll take this one.
Alright, you'll take the first one? Alright, go ahead.
Spinning the wheel.
Oh, hey!
I got Hunter x Hunter, alright.
Nice. Gotta love it when they land on what we talked about. But then again, we talked about a lot of stuff today, so like...
And now for Jack.
And I get to... Monster! Oh, I have not read this one in a really long time. For anyone who's ever seen the anime, or anyone who hasn't actually, if you haven't seen Monster, I suggest it. It's good. Alright, so... That's going to be the setup for next time. So Alex has Hunter x Hunter, and I have Monster.
And with that, we'll see cool cats and kids next time.
Jesus. All right. I have been Jack.
And I've been Alex.
All right. Bye.
Goodbye.